Well, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Tell me about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Trent Leisy. I am a Windsor native, so I was born and raised up here in northern Colorado. Went to grade school in Timnath Elementary, and then we moved to 4 miles east of Windsor in '93.
Okay.
And so I did my middle school and high school, graduated in '99 from Windsor High School. Grew up on a farm,
Yeah.
so, an ag kid. So always outside all the
Were
time.
you in 4-H or did you kind of
Yep.
have your own
No, we did
4-H? Okay.
4-H. I
Yeah.
did 4-H for 10 years, showed pigs for 10 years,
Yeah.
and did all the catch it programs, catch it calf, catch it pig, catch it lamb, and then showed those the next year. And then after high school, I went into CSU, spent a year and a half at CSU, and
What'd you study there?
my major was political science, and I didn't have a minor declared at that time, but I knew I loved politics. I've been involved in politics since the Ross Perot
Yeah.
and Gore and Clinton debate.
Actually, like volunteering and working?
No, I
or
watched
just
it
like,
on TV.
Yeah, yeah, but you're interested.
And that just intrigued me to get into politics.
Yeah.
So when I was in middle school, our neighbor, he was involved into the Weld County GOP. And so then he started bringing me to meetings, and then I started, just
And about what
attending.
age when you
That would
started
have been
attending
about
meetings?
15, so almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
And so then I went into the military because, I just didn't feel like college was for me. My grades weren't the best, and so I'm like, I'm gonna go. So I moved to Georgia. Spent a few months in Georgia before I joined the military, and went as in the military for 4 years. Got out, and I really wanted to finish my degree, and
Yeah.
so I went back for another 4.5 years and ended up majoring in political science and majoring in history as well.
Okay, nice.
So uh, after that, I've just been involved in the ag community since I can remember. I own my own business in
Okay.
agriculture. It's called Northern Colorado Seeds. So I work with farmers in 5 different states, the surrounding
Is
states.
it what it
here.
sounds like? You're actually selling seeds to
Yeah, I'm
farmers?
actually selling corn seed to them. So I do corn recommendations. So
Okay.
I contract with one specific company, and then from there I go out and promote their brand and sell their brand. And I do a little bit of other stuff, agronomy, chemical recommendations, fertilizer, but I try to stick more to the seed side of things
Yeah.
because that's what my dad did growing up. And so it just kind of, that gene just kind of flowed into me.
Yeah.
And I realized right before I graduated CSU in 2009, that my passion was in agriculture. It wasn't in politics at that time. Now it's politics and not so much agriculture. So
But when you were at CSU, did you take any agricultural
I didn't.
classes?
I didn't. I did take a few after I graduated because I was on the GI Bill.
Okay.
And so I still had some money to use up.
Yeah.
And so I took a few ag marketing classes and stuff.
Have you ever met or heard of Temple Grandin?
I have not.
No. Okay. So there's a movie about her. She's actually a CSU professor in their agricultural department. And she was born with and obviously still has severe autism.
Oh, okay. Yes. I know who you're talking about.
Okay.
Now. Yes,
yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
anyway, if
Okay,
you've never
yes.
seen the movie, you got to watch that movie. It
Yes.
is amazing. Temple Grandin. Look her up. Anyway, but she's responsible for like shaping at least for cattle, kind of like the slaughterhouses in the nation.
Yeah.
She's designed like more than half of them or something like that. Anyway, big deal. I figured you'd maybe heard of her.
Oh, I don't remember the name, but I do remember her giving a presentation in 2009 down at, 2008, down at CASB, Car Association of School Boards, when I was
Okay.
on the school board in Windsor at that
Yeah.
time. And she gave a presentation down there.
Gotcha.
So, boy,
Anyway.
I hadn't heard
Yeah,
the name
no,
since then. So now, okay.
No, it's all good. Okay, so now your focus is more on politics. It sounds like. What are you doing there, and how did you stumble into it, and what's going on in your life, and as far as the political realm goes? Obviously, I see the Trump hat there.
Yeah, my Trump signed hat here.
By the way, someone asked for his autograph, while we were walking in here.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be worth anything in 30 years, but sure, you never know. I've been very blessed. I always like to start off my stories by saying that, you know, never say never is not real. And I remember growing up as a kid, my dad was gone all the time selling corn seed in Kansas, and I thought, oh, I'm never gonna do that, right? Like, why would I want to be away from family that long? Because he'd be gone for 3 or 4 days. The only time I didn't want him to come home is when my mom would say, "Wait till your dad gets
Oh
home,"
no.
and then you're in trouble,
Some
right?
scary words right
Yeah,
there.
and then when it was interesting because a week before I decided to go into the military, I had told a guy who just retired from the military who was encouraging me because I was really lost at that time when I left CSU, and I was just really lost the last semester. I wasn't really going to classes. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I kind of felt like I was pressured to go to college because at that time that's what the focus was, right?
Right.
You graduate high school, you go to college. And so
Yeah, you wouldn't want to end up like a plumber or
no,
a
no,
construction
not
guy.
at
Oh
that
my
time.
gosh.
No, I know, not at that time. And so, I looked at him and I said, that is the dumbest thing you could say. Why would I want to go into the military? And it was interesting. I had a dream and I woke up that next morning and went to my wife at the time and went into her work. And I said, I'm going into the recruiter's office and joining the Navy today. And she said, why? I mean, just shocked. Why? And I said, because I had this dream that I was dressed in white. I was walking through this drill hall and I turned and faced the crowd and there you were, your parents and my parents. And I said, I just feel like I have to go. And went into boot camp a couple weeks later. And when I graduated boot camp, that was exactly how I dreamt it to
Wow.
be. I was dressed in white, walking through the hall. We turned, and there were my parents, her parents, and so always start off my like that because I really feel like I was blessed a lot, and I don't probably appreciate my blessings like I should. And so, getting into politics, to me, I've been really blessed with being able to meet the president multiple times. And really, just recently, since about 2001, is when I started to get kind of dabble in the national politics scene, going to a couple events. And it's just a matter of I just met the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
And so, I've got friends that are close to the president and close to the president's family. And so, being
So
able to go down to Mar-a-Lago, being able to have conversations with him. When he was here in October for the rally that he did down at the Gaylord, I that was the last time I had a conversation with him. And it's such a surreal moment when you walk into the little room, probably this size, and there's the president and his handlers on both sides. And he looks at you and he says, I know who you are.
yeah,
And I'm like, well, I know who you are, like, duh. But just to hear those words, it's
that's
just
great.
like, never did I ever dream in my life that I would ever be that way. So, and that's really kind of sparked me to really dive heavy into politics again.
Right.
And so,
Well, I have to ask. I mean, how did you? So you jumped like way ahead, and that's okay. But I'm curious. So how did you meet him the first time?
well, the first time I met him was in 2022. I was a part of this group called the American Freedom Tour, and I had just a year prior, I had just kind of Googled, like, okay, I want to go to some national event where Trump's at. And so Bill O'Reilly, who I enjoy watching, had a history tour where he had 4 events with Trump talking about his first term and the historical implications of his first term and how history is going to judge him. And so I'm like, oh, I want to go to this. So I went to it and I liked it so much that they had one the next day, 3 hours away in Florida. And so, because I was in southern Florida, this was in northern Florida the next day. So I got on a plane and went up there and went to the second one,
Yeah.
because I was so excited to go. And then 2 weeks later, after I got home, I met a couple people at that event, and they just kind of navigated me to where I am. And, I was able to meet the right people at the right time through these individuals. And you got to be careful because, you got to really, everybody can say, oh, I can get you to Trump, but some people will say, I can get you to Trump, but you have to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah,
And a
there's
lot of
string.
times that comes with dinero, right? Like with
Right.
money. And so I was fortunate enough to fall into line with some really good people who, sincerely believe in the president, believe in the movement, were part of his campaign in 2016. And so I was able to just kind of continue to grow and foster a relationship with them. And then a couple weeks later, Bill O'Reilly and Trump had another event, two more events in Texas. And so I'm like, I got to get on the plane and go to those. So I did. And then I met a couple people through this, it was called American Freedom Tour, where, they went around the country to promote, faith and freedom and financial, wealth, and always had the president at these
Were you
events.
a member of this group, or were you
I
like?
ended up becoming a member of the group. And because of that, I was able to go to. They had their annual gala at Mar-a-Lago down at West Palm Beach, and Trump's house down there. And I was told about 3 or 4 months prior to the event, by one of my friends down there, and says, "Hey, do you want to meet the president?" Well, of course I want to meet the president. I'm not going to pay to meet the president, but of course I'll meet the president. And so they extended an offer for me to meet the president, along with my folks and a couple of my other friends that are from down there.
Yeah.
And so we're dressed in our tuxes, and we go in and got to meet him. And for me, it was more of I wanted my parents to meet him.
Yeah.
Because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, at
Absolutely.
least for them, it was, just because of their age. And, my dad's and my mom's an avid Trump supporter.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was the blessing. Like, I was okay if I didn't, meet him at that time.
Yeah.
Because I knew I'd have opportunities down the road. But for me, being able to be in there and see my parents' face and see their reaction to, meeting the president, and it was worth it. It was worth going down there. So that was the first time I met him. And then, as events occurred.
And this was all just as a result of just right place, right time. You're meeting, you're fostering these relationships, and
Yeah.
Wow. It's almost like, especially when you throw that dream in there, it's almost like God had a plan for your life.
Well, and I haven't always been the best faith walker in my life, and so I just look back at my military career and how blessed I was with the people I was stationed with, getting into the department I got into, being able to achieve what I achieved, rank-wise, and being awarded the Navy Achievement Medal as an E3, which is really unheard of. Being an E5 when I got out after 4 years is really unheard of as well. And, being part of the Iraq War in 2003, and then the tsunami that hit Indonesia in January of 2005, and being there. So seeing a war, and then a year and a half later, seeing death and destruction, so being able to, it was just a whole well-rounded, I don't know if it's well-rounded, but it was a very rounded experience for me in the military. And then just kind of getting out and going through some family hardship and stuff. And I just really feel like, I've been very blessed in my life. And sometimes I take it for granted. Sometimes I have to step back and be like, okay, it's because people ask me all the time, how'd you do that? How'd you get to meet the president? How did you, it's just, the right place at the right time, and it was just, I really feel like God put me in that position
Yeah.
to be there and to do that. So
Yeah. And so I was looking at your Facebook page just kind of in preparation. So you had links to both your kind of personal Instagram page, but then there was another one called True North Politics.
yeah,
Can you explain like your involvement with
yeah.
those guys?
So I am in a partnership with another gentleman on a company called Firefox Media.
Okay.
And what we do is we have multiple social media accounts, mainly on Instagram, and True North is one of them, and that's probably one of the biggest. And then we have access to other large accounts. And what we do is we work with clients in the very conservative realm, so mainly MAGA, and we work with members of Congress, we work with their families, we work with very conservative MAGA-based businesses that
Sure.
want to sell products, and then people who want to build their following on Instagram on a more national level. It's hard to do very specialized local. It's more national stuff.
So do people come to you and ask like, "Hey, help me out"?
Yeah, so they come to us and say,
kinda
"What are your
contract you?
rates?" And and we give them our rates. We give them what we can do. There's a lot of things, we just we can't guarantee, hey, you're going to grow X amount of followers, but
Right.
we kind of start out as a try, like, hey, we'll trial and error it for a little bit to see what works good for your account,
Sure.
because the algorithm is interesting, and I've learned a lot about what algorithm is and what it means. And so that's what True North Politics is. It's just one of our accounts that.
So without
we
giving
use.
away any trade secrets, what's the secret?
The secret is hiring a 19-year-old kid that knows a lot about social media. That's the secret.
Yeah.
Because I tell you, I'm more of the business guy,
Okay.
and so to ask me to draft up an ad or draft up a message to put out there is really, I can't do that, right? Unless you go to ChatGPT or something and do it there. But now Twitter, I can tell you how to do it on Twitter.
Right.
You just it kind of consists of fibbing a little bit.
What do you mean?
Well, so one of the ways that I grew my following on Twitter a year and a half ago, because I did run for Congress this last go around. And so, I went from an account that had no followers to I got a little over 40, I think, or 41,000 right now. And you're kind of like, breaking news, Trump's going to deport Rosie O'Donnell, right? And so then
Right,
people
okay.
read that, boom, 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 like,
Right.
you
So
know.
kind of satirical.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a little satire, but then like right after he won the election, it was, breaking news, this person's going to be appointed to this. And you didn't know, you kind
Right.
of just guess. And
Sure.
some people will just read that and be like, boom, we're going to put that
Yeah.
out there. So, so that's kind of how I grew, my Twitter.
Right.
But on these other accounts, I couldn't tell you what the sauce is other than having a young kid that knows how to sit down and do this stuff
Yeah.
pretty quick.
But are you
fast.
the one like physically writing the posts, or do you have someone that
No,
is
I
helping
have
you
somebody
do that?
that writes the posts.
Okay.
And then the
You approve
person, the approval goes through the person who we're doing the content for.
Okay.
So
But I mean, for your personal pages, I mean.
yeah. The person that does like my personal pages and stuff on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. He already knows what I always like to kind of be that conspiratorial guy sometimes, just because I know that there's a market for it,
Yeah.
right? And that's how social media is. You just follow the market.
Sure.
That's why the fake news, they've got their market of people and their hate Trump media all day long, and
Yeah.
they just put out whatever they want and they believe it and go. It goes for all sides,
Yeah.
even the pro-Trump MAGA people, and so, he knows kind of what I would like and what I don't, and
Okay, so what I have to ask you on the conspiracy side, what is kind of what would you consider kind of the craziest conspiracy theory that you think might have some truth to it? And then what's one that is kind of borderline, like, okay, that's not too crazy. I feel like the moon landing is an example of, or okay, JFK is even a better example. I feel like that one used to be laughed out. Like, you would get laughed out of the room if you brought up the JFK conspiracy. Now it seems like a lot of people, whether it's been proven or not, is irrelevant. A lot of people are kind of seemingly more comfortable with that idea that there was a conspiracy around that.
Well, I'll say I feel like the majority of conspiracies come true, right? You know, because when the whole COVID thing happened, right? It was, you know, oh, China had nothing to do with it. We had nothing to do with it. You know, it was just a natural virus, or somebody ate some bugs or something, or bats or something, and that's how they got COVID. And then come to find out all these years later, we funded it. Right? It was a gain of function research. Yeah. And so that was a conspiracy that came true. You know, and now, you know, there's people that think the world's flat. I guess maybe it is. I don't know. But I would say, you know, the one that I always fought and kind of was like, okay, people pump the brakes and calm down, was how, you know, Trump was going to be coming back, right, during the Biden administration. Oh, you know, my dad would call me. My dad would call me and be like, "Hey, Trump's going to be in office in a week," and I'm like, "It's not going to happen." You know, it's not going to happen. And so finally, you know, that's a conspiracy, I guess, that was, you know, obviously wasn't fulfilled. But, you know, the one that I would love to see fulfilled is Trump running for a third term. I mean, he won 3 times, okay? Because I do believe the election, and I guess some people will say that's the biggest conspiracy that hasn't been debunked, proven, but it has been proven, okay? And so, you know, I know, and that's what I love about Trump, is he likes to get people going, right? He's an entertainer. Yeah. So when he says, you know, I might run for a third term, then people freak out, right? Because you know, the people that don't like him are like, oh my gosh, you know, he's a dictator. And then the people who love him, like me, are like, champion him, like, yes, please go.
If you watch that interview, there's a, you know, small group of reporters asking him about that. And he's like, well, I'm not going to answer that question right now. We're going to leave that option on the table. Okay, my theory on that is Trump never takes any of his options away. No. So like when he's negotiating with Russia, nuke is always on the table. It's like probably not going to happen, but he's not going to say he's never going to do it. Yeah. He's leaving the option on the table. I think it's similar for the third term. I think he's not going to rule it out. Why? Because he doesn't know what's going to happen. There might be a civil war. There's some crazy. There are circumstances that could arise where it would be appropriate for him to continue serving, at least until, you know, if there is a civil war, for example, if that goes away. But well, he's going to keep that option on the table.
And I'm glad he does, you know, and that's what I love about Trump is, you know, some people look at me and they're like, oh, he's your God. I'm like, no, he's not my God. I said, now, I will say I do joke sometimes during your dad's services because, you know, I'll look over at the guy next to me who's an older gentleman. You've probably seen him that sits next to me.
Okay. On your right side, right?
Yeah, my right side.
I know exactly who you're
talking
about.
So, you know, big Trump guy. And, you know, your dad will say, I think your dad said something a few weeks ago about how Bible sales are through the roof, right? And so, or that they've increased. And I looked over him, I'm like, that's because of Trump. And he looks and he says, really? And I said, yeah. I said, his assassination was a miracle from God, right? Wow. I believe it was a modern day miracle. And so, and then, you know, your dad was preaching about something else and brought up, you know, Mary, you know, Jesus' mom. And I looked over at the guy and I said, hey, Trump's mom's named Mary too. You know, there's some similarities there, you know? So I like to joke with people and say that, you know, he's the modern day Jesus. And, you know, so that, because I like to get people kind of sparked up and wound up. And that. But, you know, it's like, to me, Trump, you know, people say, can you admit to anything Trump does wrong? And I said, I don't know, not me. You know, I'm just a very traditional, loyal guy to Trump. And, you know, and I think he's done a lot of amazing things. And I like the fact, like you said, nothing is off the table. and that gets people going, on both sides, because I think he likes to cause,
Yeah.
I don't want to say controversy, but he likes to cause discussion, right?
Sure.
Like he likes there to be dialogue on both sides because, he thrives off of that.
Right. What was your take on the tariff thing? So, like, the big headlines were Trump reverses course, or Trump makes a U-turn, and Trump realizes how awful his tariff policy was. What was your whole take on that situation? Do you think there was a plan behind it? Do you think it was just kind of, oh, well, there's a big reaction, I'm just going to pull back? Or
No.
What's the thing?
With Trump, there's always a plan.
Okay.
Right? I mean, he always has a plan. Trump doesn't, he's a business guy, right? I mean, that is his mentality. He looks at the United States of America as a business. And, his number one, is safety and security, and then prosperity and wealth. And those are the two things that he focuses on.
Yeah.
And so, his whole, and I was talking to somebody on Sunday about this. I jokingly said, hey, you survived Trump's 2-day recession, right? Because the stock market went down for 2 days and then it's back up, and because I think he likes to show other countries, look, I'm here to stay, and I'm not going to be. You can't push. I'm not going to roll over, right? You can't just. I'm not going to be a pushover.
Right.
I'm going to stand firm and strong, and people know that. That's why I'm glad Trump has good relations with Putin, because Putin knows nukes are on the table, right? Because they're always on the table. Not that Trump would use them, but he knows that Trump means what he says.
Right.
And so with the whole tariff thing, I'm glad. I mean, I tell, when I have this discussion with people, I said, you have a garage sale. I said, pay me to take your stuff, and then I'll sell it back to you, because that's what we're doing. We're paying other countries to take our goods, and then we're buying them back from them, and we're losing billions of dollars because of it. So I'm fine with that, and I think I don't think he sees it as, oh, people are upset, so I need to pull back. I think he, because look, there's a lot of things that go on that we don't even know about. A lot of discussions going on between countries that we don't know about. Who would have ever thought El Salvador would have taken, the illegal immigrants who committed crimes? Who would have ever thought that they would have taken that? And it's only because of Trump. And so, with Trump, there's just a lot of discussions that are being had, and we're not privy to all of them, but he looks at everything as a business. And I will say, like, for example, Trump's first term, people felt like he had a war on the ag community, because our ag commodity prices are dictated by what goes on overseas. That hurts the American farmer. It should never be that way. It should be dictated on what goes on here. Yeah. So China's a big player in market manipulation. And so Trump's like, okay, I'm going to slap tariffs on you until we get to. And farmers did hurt. They suffered. But 3 years into it, they were better off 3 years later than they were when Trump first entered office. And they were okay taking the hit, because they knew what the long-term gain was.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's what I tell people. I said, like, when you look at the stock market and how Trump, Trump's losing us money. Well, you didn't lose money because you didn't take money out. You're going to get it back. Yeah. And so I hope it continues. We should never be paying countries to take our goods. Right. They should want to.
Have you heard the Ben Shapiro take on all this? Are you a fan of Ben Shapiro, or mixed feelings?
I don't really watch him that much. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I listen to him, I think, I listen to him a lot, but I think it's because I like hearing multiple different perspectives, even though, most of them are still on the right, I would say. I still like hearing his opinion, but his take on this, to me, is a little bit shallow. I think he has the view that there's either Trump is like this 5D chess mastermind, or he just has no idea what he's doing. And those are the two views, and there's nothing in the middle. I don't think you have to be a 5D chess mastermind to do what Trump did with the tariffs. I'll explain what I mean. So I think Trump wrote The Art of the Deal. That's like his big book. He probably thought originally from the beginning, he's like, okay, I want to do a 10% tariff on everyone. And that's where he started. He's like, well, but if I implement that just right away, the stock market's going to crash. Like people are going to freak out. And so instead, what he did was scared people to such a degree. He's like 50, 70%, 100% tariffs. Everyone starts freaking out. And so then when you lower it to a 10%, it's like a relief.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would have just started at 10%, people would have freaked out about that. But I think when he started so high and freaked out so many people, coming back down to 10%, it was like a relief. And that's why the stock market bounced back so quickly. But doing it that way, I think was just it was really chaotic for a couple of days. But then now it's like people are accepting that now.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think people would have just accepted a straight up 10% off the bat.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense.
I don't think you have to. I don't think it requires a like 5D chess mastermind. I don't.
No.
I don't. I think Trump just thought like 2 or 3 steps ahead. Like, what would happen if I did 10% tariff?
Yeah.
And I don't know. For me, it's not that big of a stretch to think that he put some thought into it.
Yeah.
Like, if you put any thought at all, you could anticipate that reaction.
Well, and that's the way I love his business deal. I mean, that's why he's been such a successful business person throughout his whole life, is because he's a tough negotiator. And, he comes in and he says, hey, I will do this to you if you don't work with me. And, in the fact that, when he looks at things, I mean, he doesn't have to be president. He doesn't have to be doing this. He's losing wealth. He's the only politician that goes into politics, with money and comes out with less money, because because people, boycott his businesses and his stuff or whatever because they don't like him.
That's probably the dumbest argument against Trump and Elon Musk, even, is that people, they're just doing it for personal benefit. And you're just like, are you an idiot? Both of their net worths have dropped substantially.
Well,
involving themselves.
Exactly. And it's like, it just, I want to sometimes torture myself and get into the mind of a Democrat to find out, what are you thinking? Like, why do you feel like, for example, you love electric cars, but then you're going to tell everybody to go burn down Teslas, which are electric cars, just because you don't like.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And so I always want to jump in their mind and think, okay, why do you feel like that this is okay? Like, why do you think an open border is okay? And I just want to go into their mind and hear what they're saying to themselves to justify, their positions. Same thing with abortion. And, it's like, why is this, why do you feel like, we need to have abortion on demand and up to the time of birth? And, because it's like, you have a segment of the culture in the United States that really is driven from the Obama era, right? If you remember, back after Obama won in 2008 and took office, he went on this big apology tour, right? Like, oh, we're sorry, America's been so elite, and we shouldn't be number one in anything, and we shouldn't have capitalism, we need to have socialism, we need to have all this stuff. And so that's really shifted the culture of the Democratic Party to what we see today. And a lot of this has been in the works since the Obama era in terms of how these people think.
Yeah.
Because I just want to understand from somebody, like, why wouldn't you want to have wealth? Like, why do you think it's okay to sit on the streets and smoke pot all day? What is it? Like, what is your justification for it? I go back to this stupid gun bill that was signed into law last week, and how, it's all on the heels of the Aurora shooting back in 2012, I believe it was, which was a horrific thing. And, but we're now penalizing people because of something that happened, in 2012. And, I want to crawl on these people's minds, especially our governor and people who are, anti-guns, and say, why do you think it's so, how do you justify being okay with criminals having guns, but not law-abiding citizens having guns?
Yeah.
For example, there was a shooting at the Fort Collins Mall a week ago Sunday. 2 people died. It was a gang-related shooting. Well, I happened to be at the mall that day. We just got out of a movie
Wow.
when that happened. And then, the following Wednesday, the governor signs into law this bill. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, the kid that shot was under 18. So it was illegal for him to have a gun.
Right.
And I'm sure that whoever bought that gun didn't register that gun. And
Right.
somehow I bet it's black marketed and illegal.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're not going after those people. You're going after us who are the law-abiding citizens that, we're here to protect people. We're not here to go out and do these mass shootings. And so I want to crawl in these people's mind and be like, why is transgenderism okay? Why is it okay to go into these schools and teach 5-year-olds that it's okay to be a girl? And when you get to be 12, you can change your body.
Oh, I'm going to come back to that in just a second because Colorado just passed another law relating to that. But no, for the gun thing, you don't even have to go there about the kid being underage or did he get a background check or did he not. Forget it. It's already illegal to murder people. Mm-hmm. If you're willing to do that, then any barrier leading up to that, what's a murderer, a mass shooter going to care? Oh, I didn't take my safety class that I was supposed to. Like,
yeah, I know. I know.
Are mass shooters really concerned about taking their safety class?
Well,
I don't think
exactly.
so.
I mean,
but no. Okay, so on the transgender thing, Colorado just passed a freaking law that said unless you affirm the false gender that the child is purporting to have, your child can be taken away from you in Colorado now. If you don't, so you have a biological boy, a 5-year-old son. If he comes to you and says he's a girl, you have to now say that he's a girl. Otherwise, you risk your child being taken away from you by Child Protective Services. Mm-hmm. That is insane. So you now have to lie to your child in order to not have them removed from your home. That's insane.
And it goes a step further that it can be used in custody cases where if a child says to the courts, "Hey, my dad doesn't like the fact that I dress like a girl," then the judge is required to take those rights away and give them to
it's considered child abuse.
Well, it's the whole thing is child
but
abuse.
It's inverted.
Well, yeah.
My point is that it's inverted. It should be child abuse to tell your son that he's a girl. Yes. That is the child abuse.
Look, I was at an event a year ago where this liberal woman, hair different colors, tattoos, nose rings, you can tell what a liberal looks like. It's pretty obvious. And so, and she had her Ruth Bader Ginsburg little cup, and so, she was this, talking about how she's this feminist activist. And I said, well, if you're a feminist activist, then why are you okay with biological males competing in women's sports? Like, what have you fought for this whole time if you're okay with that? And then here comes her husband with their son, who can't be more than 5. I don't think he was 6. Fingernails painted, hair long, dress on, girl shoes on.
Well, and that's the parents doing it.
And I'm thinking that is child abuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like, your kid's 5 years old, maybe 6.
You're actually imposing a 40% suicide rate on your child.
Because if you couplate that in with the mass shootings, look at the majority of our mass shootings in recent years have been trans people. And so it's like, that is a mental illness.
Yeah.
I posted on my Facebook page yesterday of this video of this lady interviewing a gay couple who, the boyfriend is a boy, and the other boyfriend is a girl, but identifies as a man. So she says, so do you guys consider yourself gay? Yeah, but you're a biological female, right? Yeah. But we're still gay because I identify as a boy. And I'm thinking, where have we gone? Like, what's been in the water? All these vaccines.
Atrazine. Yeah.
Talk about conspiracy. All these vaccines, I think, that have been forced upon us have really messed up these people's mind because it's like, that is such a huge thing. And now, in fact, it now goes a step further where, see, in California, we took it one step further than California. California was, hey, if a student told somebody, I want to be a girl, but my parents don't let me, then CPS would come involved and say, okay, we're taking away your child. And it happened, and it has happened. We've taken it one step
You're
further.
asking for
Yeah,
something bad to happen with that
well,
situation.
exactly.
Oh
So
my
now you take
gosh.
it one step further and you're saying, okay, now you can use it in custody disputes. Now you can use it to take away a child from a parent. And you look at all of this and you're like, okay, and Trump said this not too long ago, and that is, um, you know, morality has been removed for so long out of our system, right? Our school systems, our family systems, that we're in this today because of that, you
Yep.
know, where we're confusing children because of that, that it's okay to have, drag queens in the library. It's
Yeah.
okay to have pornographic books in our public education system, which I encourage everybody to take their kids out of public education and put them into a charter or private school or homeschool because, you know, I tell this to everybody all the time, who tell me, oh, that teacher's good or that superintendent's good or this person's good or that. And I'm like, but if they're okay with giving your child porn, then they're not a good
Yep.
person.
Yep.
If they're
Right.
okay with advocating abortions, they're not a good
Yeah.
person.
Well, even just setting the precedent in Colorado that kids can actually make sexual decisions for themselves. So just look at the fact that Colorado now says if a parent doesn't affirm that child's gender, that means the child, whether it's what is it called, lupinol? What's the chemical castration? The hormone blockers.
Yeah.
Anyway, but there's all these. The point that I'm trying to make is that kids are now able to consent to having their body parts mutilated, to having the chemical castration drugs put in their system. You're allowing the precedent that kids can make sexual related decisions for themselves. I think this is a precursor to what's the term they're using now, like minor attracted persons. I think this is kind of the first, well, it might even be a few steps in at this point. But this is setting the precedent, I think, for kids to be able to consent to things that they really can't consent to. Because at that point, why can't they get a tattoo? Why can't they smoke cigarettes? Why can't they do? It's like you're allowing children to make adult decisions. Anyway, it just all freaks me. I think actually Republicans on the national level should, especially while we have control of the government right now, they should pass a law stating the truth that it's actually child abuse to tell your child he's a different gender.
Yeah.
I think we should flip it and actually make that child abuse.
Yeah.
We should just do that while we have power right now.
Yeah.
And anyone who would vote against that
Yeah.
is exposing themselves.
Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like recently, especially since Trump's election, Republicans have been more on the offense than on defense. I hate when Republicans play defense. Sometimes you have to if you're in the minority, but I don't like the defensive position, like maintain the status quo. No, I would rather advance forward rather than just hold your ground. I'm like, no, I want to actually get something done
and
offensively.
that's what I love about Trump, okay? Because he is a mastermind. He imploded the Republican Party when he said, do not donate to them, donate to me, meaning Trump's campaign, because I can use your money better than they can.
Right.
Because there is a fraction in today's Republican Party where you do have your so-called establishment Republican in name only rhino candidates or rhino politicians, and your true conservative MAGA type politicians. And people. And so for him, for when he did that back in 2015, that hurt the Republican Party on a national level and the establishment crew. And you still see some effect with the Lincoln Project and with Mitch McConnell and how John McCain acted and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Against Trump. Because God forbid, he want to make somebody's life better. That's somehow bad in some of these Republicans' minds.
Right.
And so now the party's been rebuilt, right? It's been rebuilt in a way that works for us. Now in Colorado, that's a different story. We still have our problems here, but on the national level, it's getting built and it's getting fixed. But then he took it a step further when he won, and he said he took all of the Republican congressional folks and senatorial people down to Mar-a-Lago. And this I know for a fact because I talked to somebody who was in the room, and he said, you know, that anybody that went against him would be primaried.
Mm.
And I know that's kind of made some national news. And I know Elon Musk said, hey, I'm going to help fund those candidates to run against these people.
Right.
But he's really put them on the offense where they're forced to be on the offense. I can tell you that some of them, they don't like it. You know, now Mitch McConnell, he's done. He's voted against some of the stuff Trump did. But that's why we saw all of his confirmations go through. Because there was a time we didn't think Pam Bondi was going to make it, or we didn't think that Kash Patel was going to make it.
I wanted Matt
Pete
Gaetz. I wanted Matt Gaetz so bad.
I did too. I did too. Because I believe I know he would have gone in there.
I think they should have held firm with him.
I do too. I do too. And, but, you know, Trump looked at these people and said, you know, you're either going to work with me, but if you work against me, you're done.
Mm.
And we've seen that. We saw that with the impeachment garbage that went on twice, and the Republicans that voted to impeach Trump. You know, they're not in office anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Because Trump went after him. He got the people mobilized to go after him. Because in my opinion, you know, we have the opportunity, like you said, we are on offense. And we should be stronger and better than we've ever been before, because we are. We have the Senate, we have the House, we have the White House, we do have the Supreme Court when you look at the traditional Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah, a couple of wishy-washies.
She's a little wishy-washy. Very disappointed in her. But, you know, so you do have a very good, strong, you know, conservative base in DC right now.
And you have popular support, at least for now.
Yeah, popular support. And so it's like, let's get stuff done. Let's get stuff rolling. And, you know, I think we're going to see that now with Pam Bondi mobilizing some national level organizations to, she just announced one, I believe it was yesterday or today, about going after states who are impeding on Second Amendment rights. So, you know, I know there's a big push in Colorado for her to come in here to do that. You know, he's doing that with the election stuff. And so I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of that stuff come about out of DC. But yeah, I mean, you know, but then you have to toe the line of, you know, there are state rights, you know, that, you know, the Constitution was set up to where the federal government wasn't going to impede on
but
our
even
lives.
Given state rights, you still have to follow the Constitution.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Which is why you have the Supreme Court, and thank goodness that, you know, Kamala didn't get in, because this world would be a different place, and this country would be a different place. So
we have a few minutes left here. I wanted to bring it back to the Colorado level for just a minute, and then I'll let you go. But do you think that there's any way Colorado can be saved at this point? Or do you think it's just too far gone? I
believe, it's funny, I had this conversation with a guy at the Eagles game on Friday. He's a employee there, and I always wear my Trump stuff. And so he's a big Trump guy. And he pulled me to the side and he asked me kind of the same question. And I said, honestly, I think we're gone.
Really?
I just don't see in the near future, maybe towards the end of my lifetime, there might be the pendulum shifting back. But you have so many good conservative people that are leaving the state, and they're being replaced by, you know, not conservative people, right? So when you look at the makeup in the House and in the Senate, and then our statewide races, because this 2026 is going to be a huge election for Colorado. And I will say, you know, a good friend of mine, Greg Lopez, he announced his candidacy for governor. And so, you know, I'm going to support him in every way I can. And I think he's the only candidate so far in the race. And there's great candidates in the race, but he is so far the only one that I think that can get us over the finish line. Because it's really what's going to be telling is the 2026 elections. If we can't win one statewide office in 26, if we lose some of the gains that we gained in 24, because we're not going to have the Trump bump. The Trump bump was real in Colorado. We took a congressional seat with Gabe Evans. We took over 5 House seats. I believe 4 or 5 House seats So now we're out of the super minority in the
Right.
House, and then we're one seat shy.
Thank you, Hunter Rivera, by the way. I'm just going to give him a shout out real quick.
We're one seat, yeah, we're one seat away from going into the super minority in the Senate. And so with that one seat threshold and with that 1 or 2 seat threshold in the House, it's going to be a lot harder for Republicans to keep those seats in 26. Right. We're already seeing, Democrats, the Democrat opponent that Gabe Evans beat, she now entered the race today. And
that Caraveo?
Yeah, Caraveo. She's going to have hundreds of millions of dollars behind her, right? Because the Democrats, they got money.
Yeah.
And so if we can't win a statewide office in 26 and we lose seats in 26 in the House and Senate, I think we're gone.
Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I feel like I have to hold on to some kind of hope. I can't just say, well, it's all gone to hell. It'll never, because I don't know. I can't just allow that defeat mentality to sneak in, and like there's got to be something. There's got to be something. So Greg Lopez, you think, has the best shot of anyone?
I think he's got the best shot because
the
biggest voting block, one of the biggest minority voting block in the state of Colorado is Hispanics. And so, yes, he's Hispanic, obviously, but I think he knows how to talk to them to convince them, like, hey, because Hispanics think the way we think. They're all about traditional values. They're all about the nuclear family. They're all about working hard, having prosperity, freedom, and,
Christianity.
Yeah. And they're big faith base. I mean, it's Holy Week in Central and South America, and they take the whole week off, because they are very faith based. And so, but for whatever reason, they don't seem to take that to the voting booth with them when they go vote. So it's going to be a matter of really speaking to them and getting them to get to the polls and vote for Republican. And I think Greg has probably the best shot out of all of them. And I'm not saying that just because he's my friend. I'm saying that because, I've watched him over the years, and he's a very strategic guy and business oriented that I think he has a good shot. You look at Heidi Ganahl, she lost almost 4 years ago by 20 points. Mm-hmm. I mean, at that time you're like, wow, that's huge. That's a huge deficit. And so, he's got a big deficit to overcome, but Greg is not somebody who does something unless he knows he can win. And I think he can win. And if he can win, and I hope he does, then I believe we've got a shot.
Yeah.
But if Bennett gets in, because Bennett's it doesn't matter what other Democrats jump in the race, it's going to go to Bennett.
Yeah. Okay.
He's going to be our governor. And Jared Polis will probably take his place on the Senate side of things, So we'll see. But I've just been involved in this for so long, and I've just seen how this trend goes. I've had a lot of friends leave the state.
Yeah.
And they're not being replaced by the conservatives. And Californians will say, oh, well, I moved here to get out of California. And I'm like, but you're voting the same way. And we're right on that edge of being worse than California. When it comes to the parental rights things, we're worse than California.
Yeah.
The gun thing, we're almost there. We do now have the most stringent gun law in the nation, but we're there. We're almost there.
It's scary. Greg Lopez, we believe in you.
Yes,
save us, please.
He's the man.
Yeah.
So,
Well, brother, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this.
Man.
And
anytime, man.
Yeah.
I've got an amazing Trump collection at my house.
Yes.
You'll have to come look at it.
Absolutely.
And do a little filming or something. You'd be surprised.
Heck yeah. I want to give you a chance to shout out some social media if you want to.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter. That's probably the big account that I'm on most. That's at Real Trent Leisy. That's Leisy. True North Politics is Instagram, or same thing, at Real Trent Leisy for my personal Instagram account. So,
by the way, I saw when I was looking at True North, you're followed by Joe Rogan.
Yes,
that's insane, bro. When that happened, did you
Oh, I tell you,
jump up and down a little
bit? Absolutely,
a little giddy.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like some of these people that will follow my account. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, you know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Seriously.
yeah, it's pretty cool. So,
Heck yeah.
yeah.
Well, brother, thank you so much. We'll have
Yes,
to do it
thank
again
you.
one of these days.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you.